Welcome to Liner Notes, a podcast about how scholars plan and stay organized and the tools they use. In each episode, I'll be interviewing a scholar about what's in their pen case, or something akin to their pen case if they don't have one, how they plan their time, and their secrets to an organized scholarly life. I'm Catherine Roy Jewell, a historian and professor of history at Fitchburg State University in Massachusetts. Our guest today is Eladio Bobadilla, an assistant professor of history at the University of Kentucky, who specializes in Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino studies and the modern United States. He also focuses on social movements history, labor and working class history, and politics, immigration history, nativism and xenophobia, and specializes in oral history and memory. He's currently working on a book project on the history of the immigration rights movement, tentatively titled Without Borders. Welcome, Eladio.
Yeah, thank you. This is really exciting and fun.
So we'll jump right in with segment one, which is what's in your pen case, if you have one, or akin to a pen case. And if you wouldn't mind, highlight 3 of your must-have items.
So in my real office, and this is just home, there's nothing here, right? So you can tell that there's just not a great space here. But in my real office, I have a bunch of really cool pens. I'm partial to Cross pens and Parker pens. So I have a whole collection of those that you can't see here. And the thing about that is that I don't use them. I just collect them. I do not allow myself to use any of those. They're just for display. So that's like my first category of pens, right? And then I have the actual pens that I use, the cheaper pens, because I lose them. So these are my top 3 everyday pens. But they're comfortable and they feel good. To me, those are the things that I look for in a pen. Can I lose them without stressing out? Do they feel good? Do they write, in a way that I enjoy, both writing and seeing it written? So my first one is the Pilot Precise V5. I like the needle tip. I love that. It's just so cool the way it writes, and it dries almost immediately, which I love.
That's important, especially if you're writing like in a book or something and you close it and it like transfers.
Worst. Yeah, that's something that dries quickly and easily. And usually I go for clickers, but this is not a clicker. This is one that I don't like to click. I want it to just be as simple as possible. There's something about this pen when signing stuff. I love this as a signature pen. This is my go-to. If I need to sign something, I get excited about my Pilot V5. Okay, my other kind of go-to pen is this Pentel Energel in blue. The V5 has to be black. This has to be blue. And this is kind of a similar thing. It's got a real nice needle tip. Dries quickly. It's gel, so it looks nice. This one does click, and this is sort of my everything else pen. But lately, I've been writing with the Friction erasable pen, and that's kind of taken over. I really have started to use this for everything. And one of the reasons that I like this pen is that it kind of soothes and helps my OCD. And I don't mean like a lot of people say I'm OCD about, and I mean like this is a thing, like an actual case of obsessive compulsive disorder that I've dealt with for many, many years, since I was a teenager. And this is really soothing for that. It helps me it allows me to make mistakes and be able to erase them and go back and not have this kind of take over. Because it's kind of a real struggle for this. So I love that it does that. Like it helps my mental state, and that sounds like I'm overselling it, but it really does. And it's not like there aren't other erasable pens. I think was it Papermate that used to make those really skippy pens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has like the eraser, like an actual eraser.
But they were really not fun to write with. They sort of skipped a lot. They didn't look like pens. They looked like a cross between a pen and a pencil. I never loved them, and I found these sort of by mistake or by accident, not mistake, but gave it a try, and I fell in love with them. Now I have them in every color. I really, really enjoy this pen. They're comfortable, they're clicky, they're lovely.
My husband's an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer, and he does like architectural drawings. He's never really been like a pen person. He always liked mechanical pencils, but he's gone with the Friction pens because you can get them on all the different colors, and then you can erase.
And I have this one version of it that's the 4 colors. I love this because it's actually a little bit finer, but it's got the different colors. So if I need my red pen for marking up documents, I use that. If I'm just writing notes, I have my blue. It's a really fun pen. My only complaint is that they don't last that long, but they're totally worth it. So those are my top three. Although, like I said, lately this is kind of it. This is my go-to everything pen.
Yeah, and what I like about the eraser on that one too is it doesn't seem to tear up the page.
It really doesn't.
I use a pretty thin paper for most things, like a Tomoe River paper from Japan. And some of the erasers they'll like snag and they'll catch and they'll even rip the
Yeah.
paper because it's so thin.
Or leave that streaky, ugly thing. Yeah.
I'm very curious about people's note-taking habits as well with these different pens. Like when you're reading or when you're editing, like what's kind of your strategy? Do you use like the colors to mean different things? Do you use color coding or does that not?
So my color coding is not the pen. The pen is usually just the same pen for everything. But these things like this, and they, each color will mean something different. Like red will be, you need to go back and look at this. Green is this I told you so kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, I knew that. I was excited to see that. And there's different colors. Or stickies. I use the stickies of different colors. And I love the way that a book looks, after you've finished, marking it up. I don't write on the books, ever. Again, OCD stuff. I feel like book is ruined once I've done that. And I know other people feel like it's not their book until they've done it. So there's so many different philosophies, right, about this. But I color code with stickies usually. And I write on the stickies, and then that becomes my...
I like to pull the stickies out. Like I'll use stickies. I do write in the books less though. I write in the front of the books. And so if I'm looking for something, and it's usually the stuff that I want to use. Like as I'm reading, I'll end up with kind of like a circle of sticky notes around me. I'm like, I know that I want to do this. This is going to go into a chapter. This is going to go into a chapter. And then when I'm actually writing, I'll pull the stickies out. It's almost like they become my new index card, I think.
I get that.
But I can stick them on a piece of paper when I'm outlining. I was just outlining a new chapter today. And so, all the sticky notes that I've taken from my reading will end up on here. But I have no color.
Does that say chapter 13? That's a long book.
It is a long book. It is a book that I've already cut in half, and it still has 15 chapters.
Well, that's fine. I would love to be able to kind of cut things down to where everything is a 3 or 4 chapter thing, but it's impossible. It's also fun. I don't know if you'll agree. I think it's kind of fun to cut stuff. Do you find that? I know people hate doing that. I actually kind of enjoy it. I like finding ways to make something more concise and more compact. It can be painful. But
there's a particular mode of editing that I can go into. And actually, when the pandemic first started, this was sort of the only writing task that I could kind of mentally tackle. And like every day I was like cutting, like wordsmithing, like just making everything more compact so I could just kind of see the ideas more clearly. But it didn't really take like a lot of higher power brain work. I didn't have to like do any kind of big thinking about the project. It was just this sentence.
Which is nice because you feel like you're getting stuff done and it's not so taxing, right? Yeah, I've done the same thing. My problem right now is that I have like several projects running around, none of which are fully developed. My job right now is sort of to cut projects so I can get something done. But it is fun to find something that you can kind of just take stuff out of and make more compact.
And it feels like I'm not doing anything when I'm doing it sometimes. Like I'm like rereading a chapter. I'm rereading a chapter. Every time I go through that, it gets a little sharper and a little, like I move one thing and the idea comes a little bit clearer in my head. And it then leads me to the next cut or the next move or clarification.
I realize I've taken you in a whole different conversation now, but
no, that is the point of this, because it's funny how just talking about these simple things that our tools they matter to us because we select them for for real reasons, even if it's just like like hotel pens or something. It's
how we think, right? And it's how we develop ideas and arguments, and it is cool. Like we started talking about what pen to use, right? And then we 5 minutes later are talking about structure and arguments and different projects. So,
and if you think about it, the goal of like signing a book, that's ultimately our goal, is that we want to get to that point where we're autographing the book.
And sharing the knowledge with other people and sharing our love of whatever we wrote, right? And the topic with someone else.
It's a very personal thing, and all these things that we're talking about, these methods of organizing our research or our time, they're very personalized, and that we want to empower people to find their own way, but at the same time there is something, it's something that you can
Yeah.
connect to with others.
Yeah, it really is. It's a community.
So also to segment two, which is how you have all these different projects that you're working on or trying to manage and prioritize. So how do you organize your time? How do you go about, you teach, you're a parent, you have all these different projects. How do you organize your day? What's your method?
Yeah, so I mean, the parent thing is new, as you know. Baby's 4 months old, so I'm still trying to figure it out. I think you have much better handle on that than I do, but I hope to figure it out someday.
That is my pants.
Right now, I'm just trying to survive, honestly, to get enough sleep to be able to do something, to be able to kind of, participate in my son's life and be there for him and be a co-parent to my spouse. But when I am able to work, I try to really get organized first and have a plan. So I use a paper planner. Probably use a lot of. I'm probably redundant in a lot of things. So I have all my appointments, deadlines, things like that in Outlook, and I want to be able to jump on the computer and see what's due that day or who I'm talking to. To do things like the to do items are always on paper. There's something about that to me that just helps my brain process it better. If I put to do items in Outlook or anything like that, it's overwhelming. I don't like it. It makes me feel anxious. Something about paper makes me feel more reassured. I think it's that I can check things off. I honestly think that's it. Just that I can physically be like, oh, yes, done. Like it's like a drug, right? And yeah, and it feels so good.
Yes, and sometimes you have to write the thing that
Yes.
you did and
So
expect
you could check it
so
out.
that you can cross it
Exactly. Yes, I do that every single day. In fact, sometimes I go looking for stuff that I can put on here and be like, oh, what did I do today that I can check off? Makes me feel more productive. Anyway, so I start on paper, get a list of things I need to do. I prioritize and rank things that need to be done, right, versus things that can be moved. I started doing the dot system, like a modified dot system that allows me to check things off or move things or annotate things. So I do that on paper, and then I try to come up with a schedule. That doesn't always work, but I try to have a clear times that I need to be doing things. And then I just try to do them. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it feels good to me to have a plan on paper, literally on paper, that I can follow along, check off, and try to move through.
I have the same redundancies that I find I need things that ding at me. I have a
Right.
meeting. Like if I just write on a paper planner, like I've got a meeting at 3, I'll get distracted or I'll forget that I have it. And it ends up being a disaster. Being able to look at the week on paper and just to kind of see the flow and like see when I have these big chunks of time, just kind of helps me anticipate how the day is going to go.
I don't know if you find this too, but one thing that helps me stay accountable too is like if I have an action item that I didn't get to, then I'll do the arrow and move it down, and I can see, hey, that was supposed to be done like 2 days ago, and it's okay. I've moved it, but Eladio, like, get on this, right?
And then tackling that one kind of pressing task can also then give you momentum in the next thing. It's like you get that win.
I like the way you put that win, right? Because it's, I think, something that we as academics are always chasing. I've worked 9 to 5 jobs, and they can be fulfilling in their own ways, and they can have their own downsides. But one thing about a kind of typical 9 to 5 job is that you go in, you have a list of tasks, you do them, and then you're done, right? And then there's the next day. But we don't have that, and so we have to kind of find ways to build that into our lives.
And I post on Twitter about this a lot, but I give myself stickers, like literally give myself
That's not a bad
stickers.
idea, actually. It's just a tangible thing that you can see, right? And yeah.
That just those little, kind of a reward system, because you're right, we don't really have those points of satisfaction. At the end of the semester, we get like, thank yous from students maybe, or when we publish a book, we get nice blurbs and people say nice things, but we don't have a lot of that positive
Yeah.
feedback system, but also just that like sense of
Right.
completion on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Having the young baby, you're bringing me back to when I had Leo. I was still writing my dissertation, and I couldn't necessarily plan what I was going to write, but I could plan chunks of
Hmm.
time. And I had a to-do list that was just like 20-minute blocks because with a
That's all
baby,
you
you
get.
never really know.
Yeah. I've proposed to not offer parenting advice because so much of the parenting advice that I got, like sleep when they sleep. I mean, that's great in theory, right? But when they sleep, you gotta like go eat or fold the laundry. Like there's just no.
Yeah, there's this wonderful scene that I feel evokes so much. It's a Jack Nicholson movie when he's the writer and I can't remember the name. It was when he's with Helen Hunt
Oh.
and he's sitting down and he's got like the perfect like flow over and he's like, love is, and then he gets the interruption. He's like, son of a bitch. I'm like, that's sort of like the parenting
Yeah.
writing conundrum, like on
Is that
repeat.
as good as it gets?
Yes,
Yeah, which is a I love that movie. It's actually a movie about OCD, right? And about this guy's struggles. And so I relate to it a lot. And
so segment three is I've turned it as this, share a secret for an organized scholarly life. But I'm wondering, what's your advice that you could give to people who are looking for some path to organization?
there is no secret, right? It's so individualized, and we all have our own process, and different things work or don't work for different folks. So I'll tell you what works for me. I guess if there is a piece of advice here that I would start with, especially for grad students that are just starting this new thing that no one really tells you how to survive, is just have a plan and have a process. What that looks like is going to vary widely from person to person. But if you have a process, a workflow, from the beginning, you can save yourself a whole lot of pain and a lot of headaches later on. So for me, what I figured out probably like 3 years into grad school and that I still use now as a faculty member is this little process that starts with paper. Again, I go back to paper, and it can be. I don't have a specific form of doing this. I sometimes just start on blank, like printer paper or a legal pad or anything else. Until recently, I had a Samsung Note, and I loved it because it had a pen. And it's a whole thing that I can talk about for 2 hours. Why I left that and why I want to go back. But anyway, I like to take notes and just figure out what's the question that I'm asking here. What do I need to do to answer the question? What is potentially the argument that I want to make in this piece, whether it's an op-ed or a book. I just write it down. I've incorporated a little bit more of a digital aspect lately. I've started using this app called Bear. I don't know if you've used it before. It's just a note taking.
I've seen
Yeah,
it.
it's really
Yeah.
cool, and it's bare bones. It actually looks intimidating in how simple it is, but it's really helpful and kind of
It's
organized.
a very minimalist kind of aesthetic, right?
Yeah, yeah, and so I've used that quite a bit. After I take notes, and I often do that because if I take notes quickly, I'll scribble things that I can't read. I'm like, what was I don't know what that word is. But if I've just written it down, I usually remember. So I will write it down on paper so that my brain sort of lets me go from here to here and get it down on paper. Um, and then I transfer it to something digital like Bear. I used to use Evernote, which is still fine. I think it's okay, but I like Bear better. Then I have a system of document collection and digitization. For that, I still use Evernote because you can nest things and find things, right, and tag things.
And OCR.
Yeah, that's so cool to be able to scan something and search. Then I find a way to organize it, usually within Evernote or something like it, um, and I connect each document to a citation. So I think you know from my tweets that I'm a huge fan and proponent of Zotero or anything like Zotero. Some people use EndNote. Um, Mendeley I actually hate with a passion, but it works for some people. But I like Zotero a lot, and it just if I create a citation as soon as I've dealt with or come across the source, then it's always going to be there. I don't have to go looking for it ever again, and I love that. It takes a little bit more time up front, but I think of it as kind of paying myself later. And so I immediately try to create citations for any book that I've read, for any journal article that I've downloaded, for any document in the archives that I've found. The last time I was in the archives, which feels like so long ago, I just sort of did it on the fly. So every time I'd come up with, or every time I'd find a really important document, I'd just create a citation. And I didn't do that for every single thing, but I did that for anything that I knew would be important. By this point, I have notes. I have some sort of organization that allows me to find what I need, and I have citations. And then I get to writing, of course, and then from there, when I need to revise something, I like to print out whatever it is that I'm working with and just kind of look at it and go through it once without making any notes unless it's really important, something that I'll forget. Just read it, get a big picture assessment of it, and then go back and find things that need to be revised, edited.
So I have a Zotero question. I've used it for like a lot of newspaper articles, primary sources, less the archival documents. I'm wondering about how, like, say when you're writing a chapter, you're organizing materials that are going to go into a chapter or a section of a chapter. Do you have any like metadata? Like, what's sort of the next layer on top of the source that you use so that when you're writing, you know, like, okay, this chapter is going to pertain to like kind of these three arguments and this set of primary sources. Like, do you print out a list? Do you, like, I have actually printed out a list, cut them up, and like pasted them onto paper from Zotero so that I know, like, okay, when I get to this section, I've got to make sure I insert this document. Like, do you have a process? Do you use
Yeah.
tags? Do you use folders? What's your approach
I hope
there?
I'm understanding your question, but let me answer it and then you tell me if I've answered the question. So, tags are great. I always use tags for topics or themes. But the other thing that I didn't mention that I try to do, especially with big projects, not with like an op-ed, but with a book or even a journal article, I just use a kind of very simple spreadsheet to give myself chronological outline the story. One of the things that really helped me when I was a grad student was to hear from my advisor over and over again, chronology is your friend. We're historians, right? So that makes sense. And I don't think I often consciously try to keep that relevant in my work, but I have tried since I heard it, over several years from my advisor. And it really does help. So I like to just create a kind of story. Leave the argument for the notes, but just what's the chronology here? So I'll have like date, event, or description or whatever, and then the source. When I'm looking at that and I'm starting to write, I can kind of see what the story is. I can start writing it, and I know where the documents will go, generally. It's not a perfect system, but it works for me.
It's such an organic process. Like we read these documents and, we know this body of literature, but then, so we have like these ideas about like how we're going to use these sources to talk to this
Yeah.
literature. But then, the actual process of doing that, I feel is still very
Yeah.
invisible.
Yeah, it really is. So I came up with this system when I was in. It's really dark, but my father-in-law was in the hospital terminally, and we kind of all knew he was going to be there one last time, and but we are also going to be there for weeks. And so my wife was like, bring your computer, do some work, it's okay. And I did. We sat there, we talked with him, we kept him company, and when he was watching TV or when he was asleep, and I would just pull out my computer and go through my Evernote and create this timeline. And after a couple of weeks of just being there in the hospital doing nothing, I started doing that. And 2 more weeks after that, 2 weeks later, I had this really nice outline of the chronology. And then what I did was use highlighting of different colors. So one for the actual story that I'm telling, and one different color for the historiography, for arguments. And it was really nice to be able to just see it, right? Like, this is the story, and also this is how the story is being told over time, and this is what I'm thinking about how that story is being told over time. And when I got to writing, I think I wrote, my dissertation, the first draft, not the whole dissertation, but just like a first draft. After having done that, it took me just a couple of months to get everything in writing. And of course, it took a whole lot longer to make it decent, but just having that allowed me, gave me the confidence to just put stuff in writing, to write a draft, and just kind of tell the story and then figure out what I need to say about that story later.
It can be very hard in those moments where you don't feel like you're
Yeah.
working. your attention is really on, these important things in life, right? But it's interesting how even behind the scenes, the ideas are coming together, like even just through kind of data entry and just that process. You're like creating the foundations for the work later. And then it takes all of those different moments together. It takes driving in the car or taking a
Yeah.
shower. Those matter as part of the process of, even just letting it sit for a little
Yeah.
while as part of the
Yeah, and
process.
that process doesn't need to be glamorous, and I think most often it isn't. It's a lot of dirty work. It's a lot of mundane work. But if you do that work and if you commit to it, then you can really get creative and you can really have fun with it. And to me, it's that's sort of the process: is get the mundane stuff out of the way, get some sort of organization in my project, to find the general outline, the chronology, to find the story, to find the arguments, lay them out in some way, and then really have fun with it. Then really see it, picture it, and process it, and then tell my story. So that's worked for me. Again, I think everybody has a different process, but that's been something that has allowed me to write without too much anxiety and stress. I mean, there's always some, but allows me to really see things, again, process them, and then say what I want to say.
And I really like how you emphasize this idea that you're telling a story, that, that there are these multiple layers, your voice comes into it. And I think a lot of times it feels like, there's a sort of established story out there and like, what do we have to contribute to it? But
yeah, I think it is. And I think ultimately that question can be paralyzing. Right? What is it that I'm doing here? What's new? What's my contribution? Just seeing what others have said and what as you put it, the established story is, allows you to find your voice and to figure out, actually, there is something here that I want to say that is unique, that's original. Even if I just say the same thing differently, right? If I bring a different perspective to this story, it will be a contribution worth including in this conversation.
I mean, right, it comes back to the pen. The pen is part of your voice. The paper, that you're putting it on. It's about
Yeah,
expressing
and it's kind of cool,
yourself.
right? You start and end with the pen. You start by grabbing your pen and taking notes on something very abstract and formless, and then ideally you end with writing, or signing your book for someone and putting your signature literally on this thing that you've worked on for years, and then letting it go and letting someone else enjoy what you've done for the last several years. I think if there's a story within the story for me, it's the pen. You start with the pen, you take some notes, and then eventually you sign an autograph, and you share your work and the love and also the pain that you've been through for years with other people.
Well, thank you so much for bringing it kind of full circle and wrapping it up
I
so
didn't
poignantly.
plan on that, but it worked out, so I'm so glad. Yeah, no, the pen is everything. So thank you for letting me talk about pens with you. It's really fun.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of Liner Notes. For more information about the podcast or my research, visit my website at catherinejewel.com. That's Jewel with 2 L's. There you can find show notes for the podcast as well as future episodes.